Eyes up, Guardian. Today, to celebrate the release of Destiny 2's Beyond Light expansion, we're going to be making something from the official Destiny 2 cookbook. Since we have a return of the Cosmodrome, I thought I'd use a recipe from the EDZ Earth, so Trossland gives us braised red cabbage and apples. For this, we're going to be using 1 tablespoon of coconut fat, 1/2 of a yellow onion, 1 Granny Smith apple, about a half a teaspoon of salt and pepper, 1/2 of a red cabbage, 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, 1 tablespoon rice vinegar, 1 tablespoon brown sugar, and 1/2 cup of water. As always, I'd like to thank everyone who's been watching and sharing the videos. It helps out a ton, and if you enjoy this video and you haven't already subscribed, subscribe for more like this. Now, the first thing we need to do is cut our cabbage in half and get rid of the outer layer. I needed to take off 2 layers on mine because there were some gouges in my cabbage that had cut into and past that first layer. This is to get rid of any dirt and pesticides or any other things that might be from shipping. We also need to core our cabbage, and you can do that easily just by doing a V-cut on the core like I do here. Once it's halved and cored, we just need to slice it into very thin strips. I'm making these all about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch in width. This will let me get some of the softer pieces while also allowing most of the cabbage to remain a bit crunchy, which is how I like my cabbage. Once you have all the slices, I'm just going to make an additional cut right across the middle to make the strips just a little bit smaller. And once you've done all that, I'm going to rinse these off just to get rid of any other dirt. And that's, with cabbage, you want to rinse it after you cut it because a lot of times the dirt will be in between the layers. And if you rinse it off at this point, you can just leave it on a plate to dry while everything's getting ready. Alright, now for our apple, we just need to cut around the core like this, and then if you can, if you're comfortable, trim the core as I'm doing here. You don't need to do that if you don't want to and you're not comfortable with it. Once we have the apple broken down into easy to hold sizes, we can just start slicing the apple. We just, again, want to keep our slices between about 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch, and this is going to let them be just thick enough to retain the shape of the apple slice while being super soft in the final dish. I think they may have had a slightly bigger apple than mine, judging by the picture, so my apple was pretty small. If yours looks bigger than mine, don't worry, yours is probably more accurate to the recipe. Alright, for our onion, we just need to cut our onion in half, get rid of the paper and the outer layer, and once you've done that, it's just more thin slicing like we've been doing. I did put an extra slice right down the middle of these to make the pieces just a little bit smaller. I also had a pretty small onion here, so similar to the apple, I think it might be better off with just a slightly larger onion than mine. It was really good, so again, don't worry if yours looks bigger or maybe it was even slightly smaller than mine. It's still going to work out fine. Now, I would say if you can find Vidalia onions, this is a really good dish for those because they'll have a little bit more sweetness and you're going to get a slightly deeper onion flavor from that. Once all that is sliced, we are ready to go into the pan. Into a pan preheated to medium high, we go with our onions and apple slices after our coconut oil has melted. We'll need to cook them for a few minutes by themselves to get them just a little bit softened. You need to do this so you can control the crunchiness of your cabbage with your cook time, because if you put them all together in the pan at the very beginning, by the time your onions got soft, most of your cabbage would basically be mushy, and that is definitely not what you're looking for. So, about 5 minutes or so into the cooking of the apples and onions, we're going to add our salt and pepper, and I just did that so it would just have a little bit more time before we added anything else but the apples and the onions. Once you can bend them like this, you know you are good to go on to the next stage. Alright, once they are nice and bendy, we just need to add the cabbage and cook for about 5 minutes or so. This is going to let us break up the cabbage while we put it in and inspect it a bit while adding it. Occasionally you'll find a cabbage with a layer in it similar to the paper on the outside of an onion. This layer gets stretched and dried out and tends to taste a bit bitter, so if we see any like I found here and you can see me picking out, we want to get rid of that. There's nothing actually wrong with the cabbage, it just has a layer that's been a bit too much on the outside and is now on the inside. You can easily grab these up if you missed any while washing them like I did here. I wouldn't use these for stock or anything though, you would just want to throw those away. It doesn't have anything good flavor to them. So that's why we do want to pick them out. Once all the unsightly bits have been removed and our cabbage tips have just started to soften, we are ready for the next step. Now we just have to add everything else to the pan and let it come back up to a boil. I usually start with the brown sugar before the liquid so they can help disperse it into everything by melting it away. From there it's just stirring and make sure to keep mixing everything to to get everything nice and cooked evenly. And this is the final stage in the boiling and simmering we'll be doing here. We'll be doing most of the lifting to blend all the flavors, and as the liquids evaporate, we get a sauce-like glaze that just clings to the cabbage. Now, the amount of cooking you do here will dictate the texture of your cabbage. So, for example, if you like your cabbage super crunchy, just barely cooked, you're going to want to be around that 25 to 30 mark, and that's going to get that. Now, on the other hand, if you'd like something much, much softer but still retaining a bit of its shape, you're going to be around that 45-minute mark to hold onto its shape but not become mush. So, you kind of want to taste the cabbage about every 5 to 10 minutes or so after the 30-minute mark to get the desired firmness that you want in your cabbage. Mine was about 35 minutes, and I kind of like it that at that short of a time. I also managed to retain some of the color of the apple pieces, so they weren't all purple yet. Once you get to your desired texture, the dish is done. I kind of like this recipe's color. While not quite darkness and a bit more void, I think it really nicely fits the theme, even though it's slightly off in the color. The cookbook, by the way, is really neat, and there are some great dishes in there. Some are a bit more normal looking than this, but every one we tasted was really good. Also, while it's not a normal pairing, we had this with a spicy sausage and rice dish, and the two actually paired really well together. The more normal pairing would be something like lamb or pork cutlets, typically pan-fried. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for watching and hope you have a great day and a great meal.